Were gamers tarnished with their experience in the lands between, or did they finish their quest to repair the Elden Ring? Let's find out. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I am BD, and this is Did Anyone Play, a series where we investigate, analyze, and determine the truth about how much gamers have actually played the game in question. How do we do this? We use critical milestones within games, and then compare those results to an ever-growing database of results to evaluate and rank games compared to all the rest of the industry. We use objective data and unbiased statistical comparisons to draw conclusions. This is not a game review, and we do want all games to succeed on all platforms. Our goal is to provide data and results that can be used to better contextualize real-world player performance and ignore hype and game sales numbers, as those can be misleading. Please drop a like or a sub to the channel if you want to see more of these types of videos. We're just starting out, so anything you can do is very much appreciated. And a quick spoiler warning to anyone concerned, as we may be talking about elements of late game progression. So let's find out if anyone actually played Elden Ring. For those in a gaming black hole for the past few years, Elden Ring is an action RPG developed by From Software and published by Bandai Namco. Players take on the role of a tarnished, summoned back to the lands between to attempt to repair the fabled Elden Ring after it had been shattered. Taking place in a handcrafted open world, Elden Ring has a strong focus on combat and exploration. Players can use a variety of weapons and magic spells to combat the numerous and challenging enemies that the lands contain. Elden Ring is an evolution of the Souls-style games that are renowned for their difficulty. Elden Ring was released for Steam, Xbox, and PlayStation in February of 2022. Now, launch conditions for a game can be a critically important factor in determining success or failure. So we use four major factors to put into context the launch conditions, and those factors are pedigree, competition, hype, and reviews. We'll be giving each one a rating for some context. Elden Ring was developed by From Software. Other games that From has developed are Dark Souls, Armored Core, Sekiro, and of course their most difficult game, and one that almost ended my marriage, The Adventures of Cookies and Cream. From Software has a great track record with many of their games highly regarded, so pedigree for Elden Ring is strong. Next, we can focus on competition that surrounded Elden Ring around its release. What was happening in the gaming release schedule around February 25th of 2022? A few of the larger titles coming out around that time were Lost Ark, Horizon Forbidden West, and Destiny 2: The Witch Queen. We will consider these games the competition for Elden Ring. Based on this, I think we can safely say that competition for Elden Ring was average. Was there a lot of hype for Elden Ring? Well, if we look at Google Trends compared to the competition at the time, we see that Elden Ring in blue is crushing the rest. Lost Ark is the only one that even comes halfway close, but it's clear by the data the hype was strong for Elden Ring. And finally, we can take a look at the critical reception. Metacritic has it at a 94 to 96 depending on the platform, and the game was received with universal acclaim. Many outlets gave Elden Ring perfect scores. At the 2022 Game Awards, it won Game of the Year as well as 4 other categories. Reviews and awards for Elden Ring were definitely strong. Alright, now that we better understand the game and the launch conditions, we can get into our milestone analysis for Elden Ring. To do this, we select 5 distinct milestones from the game. We like to choose 2 early milestones, a mid-game milestone, a game completion milestone, which is the most important, and finally a rare milestone to help us see the full picture. One thing to note is that we tried very carefully to choose the milestones as fairly as possible for this game, as the nature of how the open world is designed, players can skip a lot of milestones if they choose to. We will be using Xbox as our main platform for Elden Ring analysis. Milestone 1 is called Margit, the Fell Omen. There is quite a bit of open world and other difficult challenges players can encounter before this milestone, but this is a mandatory boss and ends up being the first boss encounter of that type you reach in the game. So how many players in Xbox reached that first boss? 48.6%. That means that half of the players on Xbox that started playing Elden Ring quit before they ever reached the first proper boss. That's shocking, really, and a very poor player retention start. Let's move on. For Milestone 2, we have Shardbearer Godric. This is awarded for defeating Godric the Grafted. Godric is another mandatory boss and is the first great rune boss of the game. This cannot be missed as the player progresses, and so how many Xbox players ended up completing this milestone? 43.2%. That's at least looking fairly good from a hold standpoint from Milestone 1. So let's move on to Milestone 3. Our mid-game milestone is called Godfrey, First Elden Lord. Godfrey is a mandatory mini-boss in Elden Ring and can't be missed. So how many players beat Godfrey on Xbox? 31.4%. so we've lost 70% of players at this point. But what about finishing the game? Elden Ring is a little different as it has multiple endings depending on your choices. We've chosen the highest percentage obtained for Milestone 4 and the lowest percentage obtained for Milestone 5. So Milestone 4 is called Age of Stars. It's awarded for completing the main story and completing Ranni's questline. On Xbox, 13.6% of players did just that. Only 13% of players on Xbox experienced an ending for Elden Ring. Finally, the rare Milestone 5 chosen for Elden Ring is called Lord of Frenzied Flame. This is achieved if the player can find a secret hideaway in the Cathedral of the Forsaken after beating Mog the Omen. How many players achieved this rare milestone and ending? 7.1% of players. So this is our final tally for Elden Ring Xbox milestones. Of course, that's just the start, because now we can use those numbers and figure out how Elden Ring stacks up against everything else and find out if anyone truly played this game using the database and percentiles. To make it simple, we've created 6 percentile rankings, with bronze being the lowest played ranking and legend being the highest played ranking. An easy way to understand percentiles is if a game is in the 95th percentile, it's better than 95% of all other games in the database. The beautiful thing about this method is that as we add more and more results to our database, the analysis only grows in power and accuracy. Now let's deal with the question we all want to know the answer to. Did anyone play Elden Ring on Xbox? For Elden Ring on Xbox, 13.6% of players completed the story. Knowing this and applying it to our percentile rankings in the database, we can calculate the ranking Elden Ring gets. Here we go. And there you have it. We know Elden Ring on Xbox achieved a silver ranking, which means the game performed below industry average and better than only 20% of all other games. In other words, not many people played Elden Ring on Xbox. But now we can go further, because we have PlayStation and Steam results for these milestones for Elden Ring. Elden Ring released simultaneously on all platforms, so all results are directly comparable. The PS4 and PS5 versions are different for milestones, and we do show those here. Graphically, we represent PlayStation 4 in light blue, PlayStation 5 in dark blue, Steam in red, and Xbox in green. We have also added the DAP database averages for each milestone in gray for comparison purposes. All 4 start at 100% and show how they progress. Let's get into it. What exactly do we see in the data? The first major item to address is that Xbox performed worse than all other platforms across the board for Elden Ring. Secondly, we can see from Milestone 1, Elden Ring really did struggle to hold on to a good amount of players. Steam was the strongest out of the gate, losing just 26, with PS4 a close second at 27%. And that's far better than Xbox losing 51%. The player retention from Milestone 1 to Milestone 2 is really good across all platforms, and you can see that effect really improves Elden Ring against the database. As we move on to Milestone 4, you can see Steam has the best game completion player retention, with PlayStation very close. And finally, our rare Milestone 5, both PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 finish ahead of Steam, leaving it with the best final player retention by a slim margin. Now we can determine the ranking on PlayStation and Steam using our database comparison, and we see that Elden Ring on PlayStation achieves a gold rating, and Steam does the same. So while not many people played Elden Ring on Xbox, Steam and PlayStation are above industry average and performs better than 50% of all other games. Now there's a lot to unpack here. We can tease out some other observations by looking at these results in different ways. It's time for the deep dive. Let's start with progressive player loss. Each milestone shows how many total players have stopped playing the game at that particular point. Again, Steam performs the best, with retaining players throughout the story, but PlayStation 4 sticks right with it. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said about Xbox, where we see that players on that platform dropped big at Milestone 1, held on decently to Milestone 2, before dropping more at Milestone 3. Early player retention on Xbox continues to be rough, as seen on some of our previous games, and this time Game Pass is not in play. Moving on, we can look at milestone player retention. This calculation only takes into account the player population loss as compared to the previous milestone and shows it as a percentage. This ignores previous milestone loss, so we can look at each milestone transition individually and avoid certain data bias. And what you see here is that at every milestone marker, Xbox has the largest negative percent change, so no matter where we are in the stages of gameplay, Xbox is losing the most players by percentage. Steam and PlayStation shuffle positions over milestones throughout game progression. Now how about completionists? How did the rarest milestones shake out on the different platforms? Here we can see that PS4 and PS5 were strong, and Steam was no slouch as well. Xbox, while smaller, holds pretty strong considering the significantly lower amount of players left on that platform. Finally, we check on early versus late game retention. When you read a chart like this, the best performers are further away from the center of the circle. So if we look at our early milestone performance, we see clear separation as Steam and PlayStation 4 show strong, and Xbox clearly lagging. Endgame retention has PlayStation 5 actually moving on top, with Steam a close second, and Xbox still trailing but closing the gap. And finally, at completion, we see that PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 4 separate further, with Xbox catching up to Steam. Let's take one final look at all the platforms and milestones ranked in full. Please take note that this comparison only works within the same game and same milestones. It would not be valid to compare different games on early or mid-game milestones, as their properties can drastically vary from game to game. Please remember that milestone 4 is where we really determine if anyone played the game because of the main story completion marker. And for Elden Ring, the start is a bit underwhelming, with all platforms starting in silver or bronze, so nothing above average. But what we see is that as the milestones progress, the game ranks better. All platforms are gold at milestone 4 except Xbox, and even more telling is that for milestone 5, PS5 reaches legend rank, and Steam and PS4 are diamond rank. Even Xbox hits platinum. What this indicates is that while a lot of players don't stick with Elden Ring early, those that do and like the game not only progress to the end, but work to accomplish some of the hardest challenges in the game. PS5 ranking legend and being in the top 5% for milestone 5 completion is a massively positive indicator. So what are our major takeaways from all the data? Early player retention for Elden Ring is a problem. It has a huge hit on Xbox, but all platforms were below industry average at the beginning. The crazy hype around this game may be to blame, as I could see a lot of non-Souls-like gamers buying this game and not liking the style of gameplay offered in Elden Ring. I can also see that the openness of the world could push players away if they felt overwhelmed by it. After that initial loss, what we see is a great retention of players in the mid-game, showing that when gamers are invested, they stay invested. Completionist milestones need to be called out again. The lowest rating was a platinum, and the best was legend. Across platforms, Elden Ring crushed it in terms of players finishing everything. And while that's all great, getting gold for milestone 4 is underwhelming for a game of this hype and magnitude. I would have expected stronger performance, and so there's definitely room for improvement on player retention. Finally, we need to talk about Xbox as a platform, because there's still a very large, early decline of players staying with the games on Xbox. Our previous games have all had a Game Pass connection, but Elden Ring does not. Why is Xbox bleeding players so early so often? We will need more data to make conclusions, but we are definitely seeing a trend that needs explanation here. What is going on with Xbox? Elden Ring is a historically great title. It crushed in sales, had amazing reviews, universal acclaim and awards, and rode in on a tidal wave of hype. And make no mistake, the data does show that people played Elden Ring. It's above average, better than 50% of all other games. But that really doesn't roll off the tongue as nicely as the other accolades. Shouldn't Elden Ring be higher in our ranking? Shouldn't more players have actually played the game? I think so. I think if you even want to be considered in the conversation of the greatest games, you have to prove people actually played them, and in large percentages. While Elden Ring has some amazing ideas, clearly not all connected with the players. With everything going for it, Elden Ring should have performed better. The hype and reviews brought in sales, but the game itself did not deliver the same levels with player retention. They were solid, but I expected more. I think the challenge here is what to take away from Elden Ring. There are some great ideas, the open world, the combat, the design, but not all of it hooked gamers the way it should. So if other developers take away the wrong things, they could be in for a rude awakening. In the end, hopefully this can help inform future developers who can look at how Elden Ring succeeded and held on to players later in the game, while removing the elements that made so many leave early on. The goal for game developers is to have people experience their game. We want hard work rewarded, celebrated, and experienced by the gaming community. And that's a wrap. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to do all the YouTube support stuff. I'd love to read any comments you have down below. What conclusions did you all take from this data? And of course, feel free to suggest the next game we should look at to determine if anyone played it. Until then, take care of yourself and each other.